Well, we continue with the broadcast this morning, and it's time now to join Imtiaz Syed, Chairperson of eThekwini Secure, our weekly edition of Crime Talk. Imtiaz, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Nat.
Yes, Imtiaz, this morning we'd like to focus a bit on bank fraud. I think
Yes,
this is important. It's not a story that is given a lot of attention, but people are impacted on this type of fraud in more ways than one, almost on a daily basis.
absolutely. In terms of cybercrime, I think as a country, we're really behind in terms of protecting and ensuring protection of our consumers. And this is something that has been coming to us in the past year, wherein we've been getting reports of people being scammed, money taken out of their credit cards, and this kind of thing, right? And just to try and assess it and understand, I think as we move into the state of technology and everyone is on their cell phones and have banking apps, where all of these things actually make life very easy for us in terms of how quickly we can do transactions and all of those things, it's also putting us at great risk. And this is something we need to understand. In history, we used to have to go into a bank or sign a check or do something like that, which had many checks and measures in place in terms of how you transact. Now, with the advent of technology, we see that people are just going onto the apps, making transactions, doing all of those things. But where the scary part comes in is that there are apps currently on your phone, which when you go onto your banking app, you don't really have to put in the OTP that comes via an SMS to you. It just shows you something on your screen that says allow. And when you click that allow, automatically you're now authorizing the transaction. And scammers have found a way around this to say, this is how it operates, this is how it functions. And they have all your details. And what we found is that you might be using an Android phone where you've registered an app over the Play Store. Also, on the other hand, there's Apple Store, which also has the same app. So they find out which app you're using and they go onto the alternate platform and try and register the same app and then monitor when you're doing a transaction, you're going to get an OTP and you automatically click allow because you know of that transaction. And all of a sudden you see there is another one saying allow, but you're thinking it's the same transaction when in fact you've clicked allow to authorize that app to be started up on someone's phone. And this is when they immediately start cleaning out your accounts and doing all of those things. And that's where we're finding the problem. When you report this to the fraud department in banks, they tell you, no, but we sent you an OTP and you clicked allow. And that's when you now end up in a bit of a tricky situation. So we need to be very wary of this. And if anyone is doing banking, you'd see currently that most banks, I think all of the banks, are sending out emails to all of their clients, speaking to them about phishing scams. And this is exactly what it means, right? That you're going to get an email, you're going to respond thinking it's the bank, and the email addresses are very similar. So you need to find out exactly what email address your bank sends you stuff on, what's their number, all of those different things, and start verifying that information. But the other scary part, United, is that as we found, when hijackings are happening, people that have apps on their phone are being kidnapped and kept for at least 24 hours. What is happening there is that they're going into your phone and they're checking whether you've got money in your apps. They're then doing those transactions and transferring money from your account. They're taking you to ATMs and withdrawing money. And once they're all done, then only they're releasing you after 24, sometimes 48 hours. And this is the scary part with having all of that transacting information on your cell phone. So my recommendation to people is, if your banking is personal to you, let us keep it at home. Let us use the phone for the purpose it's intended for. Use your WhatsApp, use your cell phone, but try and refrain from using the apps on your phone, because ultimately, when you have a situation, those things are going to be used as tools against you.
Well, Imtiaz, you know what you are saying is actually giving me goosebumps because it's actually very, very serious. You know,
Absolutely.
I mean, all of this you're basically carrying in the palm of your hand, and
Correct.
your entire life can actually be destroyed with just like you mentioned, for example, just a kidnapping alone, or in any other form of scams. You know, all of that can be destroyed in no time at all.
Absolutely. Even card scamming at ATMs, it's important for people to understand how banking systems work. I mean, ultimately, they are market link accounts. Majority of your cash should stay into those market link accounts, and you should have daily limits on your card, which is very limited to 3,000 or 4,000 at what you need, and carry those things with you. Even on your apps, try and have them hidden so that people can't see that you actually have an app. And those facilities have become available with banks. So confirm with your banks as to what facilities do they have available to protect you and protect your information out there. Because currently, right now, the criminals have become aware of how all of these things work, and they're using it to their benefit. I mean, right now, if someone's loaded Apple Pay, you see transactions are going off in Mexico and in Canada and Tijuana and all of these different countries. And the bank is telling you no uncertain terms that they cannot recover those funds from merchants because there's no international trade agreements to say that those funds will be held and all of those things. So we need to start putting measures in place. And it's very important that we start doing this because these sorts of crimes are becoming more prolific. And obviously, the banking sector is not going to come out and tell you that there is a problem because ultimately it creates fear and panic. So I'm not here to create fear and panic. All I'm saying is that these things are currently happening. People need to be aware that they're happening. And if you're doing banking and you have apps on your phone, I'm suggesting that you have spare phones. Leave the apps at home. Do your banking when you're at home in a safe space. Try and keep those banking apps off the phone that you carry.
Exactly. And also, I think, today when you find transactions, a majority of transactions are taking place with your card, whether you're filling petrol, whether you are paying for a meal at a restaurant, wherever you are. And these are also areas that one needs to be vigilant about, Imtiaz.
Correct. And ultimately, to speak to it tonight, when we go into new spaces, ultimately, criminals follow suit in that to find the opportunity. Ultimately, we end up always on the back foot because we're always chasing what's the next step and what's the next measure we put in place in order to protect consumers. But with that being said, it is most important that we create limits on our cards. We make sure that those apps are protected in our phones if we do carry them, and we make sure that we utilize these things in a very, very dignified manner. We find people saying, I need to make a payment. They just go into the app, they just click a few buttons and it's gone. But there's no real progression of the mind to say, what am I actually doing? I'm actually transacting from an account which is being exposed to people around me, to people that don't know me. So we need to really personalize this thing of saying, how do we bank? How do we transact? And how do we access our funds that we have in our capacity? Because those things can be taken away from you in an instant.
Yes, and also, the other area is tapping, Imtiaz. You
Yeah.
don't need a PIN code for that. And I think people need to be watchful about that because that's about the easiest. No PIN code. All the guy needs is your card, and he goes and he taps, and before you know what's happening, a purchase has been made.
Correctly so. If you go into your app currently, right, most banks have now facilitated this, where you can go into your card settings and you can deactivate the tap setting on your card. You rather, instead of swiping, remember, when you put in your card with the microchip pin into the card machine, that is verifiable. Put in your code. Don't try and be easy about things. Put in your code, put in the card into where it's reading the chip on your card. When you do a swipe, you're not sure whether that card is being skimmed and cloned. And this is how information leaves people. So it's important to use the microchip on your card, put in your PIN for every transaction, whether it's 50 Rand or 1,000 Rand, irrespective. But that is your protective measure. And I think currently, right now, that is the only protective measure because that chip cannot be cloned. But the magnetic strip on your card can be reinvented and recreated. All your information lies on that magnetic chip. And every time you swipe that card, if you're swiping it on someone that knows how to read all that information, they can clone your card within a few hours and start swiping and doing transactions that way. So it's important that these things happen. With regard to tap and go, remember, tapping is fairly safe because it has to be the card that you have. The chip is actually what's tapping, right? It's an NFC reader. But when it comes down to real security, put in the card, put in the PIN code, so that way you know you're safe. That was your transaction, and you can move on from there.
Well, just Jazakallah, I think this discussion has been most useful and it's been absolutely necessary as well. And as always, we thank you, Jazakallah, for your time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Imtiaz Syed was us this morning, and with that, we're heading for the news side. Jed was standing by.